Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast presents Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless.
A major break in a cold case homicide. Police identifying a Northern Neck man, Alan Wilmer Sr. Authorities say he killed 3 people nearly 3 decades ago. It was DNA that ultimately linked him to the brutal murders.
As a result of the forensic findings, both the Isle of Wight County Commonwealth's Attorney and the City of Hampton Commonwealth's Attorney confirmed that if Alan Williams Sr. was alive today, he would be charged.
Now, Virginia State Police say Wilmer Sr. passed away in 2017.
The FBI says they know the person responsible for killing 2 hikers in the Shenandoah National Park back in 1996. Officials say Walter Leo Jackson Sr. killed Julie Williams and Lolly Winans near Skyland Lodge. The victims' family members called the National Park Service after the women did not return home as planned. Their bodies were found on June 1st, 1996, after an extensive search. The FBI says it was a positive DNA match that linked Jackson to the murders. They say Jackson was a serial rapist that had prior convictions and was incarcerated. Officials tell us he died in 2018.
The person accused of killing 74-year-old Leroy Johnston at Millstream Run Reservation in Strongsville pleaded not guilty in court today. Victor Vendler is facing several charges, including aggravated murder and kidnapping. The judge set the suspect's bond at $1 million.
It looks like there's 2 bodies that were shot.
One in the water, face down, the other one by the bench.
Hello and welcome back to Who Killed. I am your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast production. This is going to be my 3rd episode back from CrimeCon, and I'm lucky enough to be joined by Nick from True Crime Garage once again. On this episode, we are going to discuss everything from the Shenandoah murders to the murder in Rocky River a few years back to the recent arrest of a suspect in a murder that occurred in the fall of September 2023. We don't know if those cases are correlated, but it was worth looking into. We also talk about a number of other issues in the world of true crime, and it's always a joy to talk to Nick. This is a Super Size Me episode, and it's about 90 minutes, and we cover a wide range of topics, and it's really always a pleasure to get together with Nick and to break down the world of true crime. So join me again as we talk with Nick from the True Crime Garage. Hello and welcome back to Who Killed. I am your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast production. I am again joined by the one and the only Nick from True Crime Garage. We just enjoyed a fabulous crime con in Nashville. We did actually get to see each other this year, and that was enjoyable. So welcome back to the show, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me. And if I recall correctly, we had a quick lunch together one day, a couple drinks during some of the evening hours. But it was a great crime con. Probably maybe my favorite one so far. Difficult to say because they're all so great, but this one I really enjoyed. I love that venue. The Gaylord Resort is fantastic. It's beautiful. You can trick yourself into believing that you're outside for portions of it, which I love to be outside. So I love that venue, love the city, and it was great. It was great to see you and all the other podcasters. There was a podcast row, which I guess we're calling it Creator
Row now, Nick.
Creator Row, and which, look, I read this book that was written thousands of years ago that talked about a creator, and I'm not going to pretend to put myself on that level at all. And I frankly didn't see anybody in that room that had or shared any of the talents from what that book told me. So Creator Row seems a bit of an exaggeration, but it was really good to see all the podcasters. And, little humble brag here. The True Crime Garage was nominated for the People's Choice Podcast Award from the Clue Awards, which I thought was incredible. So thank you to everybody who voted for the Garage Show. It's, as you know, Bill, and many of the other people on Creator Row know and understand, it's very difficult to stay relevant in the current landscape when there's so many network shows, big network shows, where they have a whole room or sometimes even a floor full of people writing and producing a show. And we just have our little garage independent show that we've been doing for 9 years, almost 9. Yeah. So almost 9 years now. And so to be voted and nominated for the People's Choice Award, it was so impactful for me. At first, I didn't really get it, right? We've not been nominated for something like this before, but it set in very quick because each week when people tune into True Crime Garage, right out the gate, one of the first things that we are saying to the listeners, whether they be a longtime listener or a first-time listener, is thanks for listening and thanks for telling a friend. Well, there's no better way to tell other people to listen to True Crime Garage than to vote for it for the People's Choice Award in a venue where it's people that are so dialed into true crime, right? So that was just a room full of wonderful people that took the time and thought enough of us to nominate us for that award. So if you voted for us, thank you. And I'll tell you what, if you voted for one of the other nominees, thank you as well, because it meant a lot to the other nominees as well. I had the opportunity and was thankful to speak with several of them. But yeah, great to see you, Bill. And I listened to you and Jesse Pollock talk last week, and it was great to hear you expressing what you were telling me, what you told me in the flesh when we were in person at CrimeCon. You said, I'm a little reinvigorated, being surrounded by some of the people that you've talked to over the years. You got to have that face-to-face from time to time, right? There's something about that personal connection and that just being human together that is powerful and is meaningful, and it does touch your heart a little bit, and it gets the old juices flowing. So it was great to hear you expressing that last week. I feel the same way, and that's CrimeCon is a way to look. I got to do a little extra work to go there. Got to do some extra work when I get back. But once those batteries get recharged, it is a great reminder of why we do what we do, and more importantly, why we connect with people that we connect with. So, and then to hear your talk with Jesse Pollock was very thoughtful, kind of a discussion that you guys had last week. So I was happy to listen to that, and a lot of talk about Lisk, Long Island serial killer. And I want to give a quick shout out, if you don't mind, the DNA ID show. Jessica Betancourt researches and presents that show, and she does a fantastic job. She just did a Long Island serial killer. It's really kind of honing in on some of the victims that we kind of knew were going to be tied to Rex Heuermann eventually, but now we're officially being told that they've tied these victims to the Long Island serial killer, your guys' discussion was very intriguing and interesting to me. Hers was obviously just a presentation, but her presentation and the information she put together on that was so incredibly brilliant and thorough. Heads and tails above and beyond anything that they've done on Dateline or 48 Hours or 2020 in the Lisk regard. So I recommend people check that out. And if they haven't listened to your discussion with Jesse Pollock already, go back and check that out too. Some good stuff there.
Yeah,
great to see you and everybody else at CrimeCon.
Yeah, and I was going to say, congratulations on, all your, awards, or you're finally getting rewarded for all the years of work. You've always been the biggest draw at Creator Row, previously Podcast Row, but there's definitely more people on Creator Row involved with YouTube and those other types of mediums, which is cool. And they should be a part of it as well, because again, it's the same thing that we're doing, is bringing attention to cases that we feel like deserve the attention. And one thing about CrimeCon that I would say is that it feels like it's shifted a bit in the previous years, from more of a entertainment thing to a more of an outlet for a lot of these families that have missing family members and advocates that want to see change and something in one of their cases. I think having the wall outside of the Creator Row exhibit hall was pretty intense, to say. It reminded me of the 9/11 wall, when everybody was looking for a family member and they had pictures up, and it just seems like while they still have entertaining things at CrimeCon, and some stuff is, not for everybody, there's a lot of advocacy that goes on there. And we individually spoke to people that had experienced stuff and wanted to see some answers and wanted some more coverage. And I think that's what is really cool about meeting a lot of these people. You meet a lot of fans and all that stuff like that, but it's the people where you can kind of talk to, and they can give you a little bit of a backstory on what's going on, and hey, I'd love to come on your show, or could you cover my case? That's cool.
But no, you're exactly right. Like I've loved to see the transition into more, not just advocacy, but also spreading awareness in these cases. And, so Brittany Phillips, she was murdered, let's see, like 20 years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago in her Tulsa, Oklahoma apartment. She was suffocated. And she was attending school in Tulsa. And the case went pretty cold, got awfully chilly for a long time. And her mother, Maggie Zigman, decided to do something about it. And so this might ring a bell or two with you here, Bill, but she did this. I can't remember if she called it the murder wagon or murder van, but she wrapped a vehicle in pictures of her daughter, information about who to call if you have information, tidbits about the case. And she would drive that murder wagon, murder vehicle with her daughter's image on it, plastered all over it, to different cities, because she knew that, because of the details of her daughter's case, that a suspect or suspects didn't necessarily have to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And people with information didn't necessarily have to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma, because she was murdered attending school there, college, and gets killed. And so some of the people that may have had information may have moved years later, returned back to their home state or home cities years after the case. So she did this for her daughter, attempting to get justice for her daughter, Brittany Phillips. It's a case that we covered on True Crime Garage, but guess what? we wouldn't have covered it had we not met her mom at CrimeCon, at a previous CrimeCon. And so this year, we covered it within the last year since previously going to CrimeCon. And so I had the wonderful opportunity to see Maggie when I walked into Creators Row, Brittany Phillips' mom. She came over, gave me a hug, and said, "Thank you for covering the case." And I told her, I said, "Look, you did the right thing. You did the best thing that if you want this story to be told," and that's what John Walsh told us back when his son was kidnapped and murdered. The best thing that a parent can do is keep the story in the media. It keeps the pressure on the cops. It keeps awareness coming in and potentially tips coming in. And I told
number one advocate.
Thank you. And so I told her, I said, she went to CrimeCon September in Orlando, September 2023 in Orlando. That's where I met Maggie. And she passed out some flyers with pictures of the murder van, murder wagon thing. And I told her, I said, "You're hugging me, but you did the best thing you could do." I said, "You went around and you told all these podcasters about your daughter's case, and podcasters will cover your case. We will cover your case." And there was and forgive me, I feel badly because the gentleman's name I don't recall off the top of my head here, but similar thing where a sister was going around because her brother had been missing for quite some time and was last seen in Florida. So she's going around to the different podcasters in Orlando telling them about her brother and him being missing. And I've seen several great podcasts cover that case as well since then. So that's what I'm telling the new people. And I hope that this reaches their ears. Anybody that's in need of help or they don't feel that their loved one's case is getting the attention that it deserves.
Was this the Deanna case? Or because I remember there's one out of Florida that I have in front of me that's the Deanna's cousin and the host of the Stand Your Ground podcast.
That may be it. From my recollection, it was a young man who went missing, I believe, in his early 20s, and there was.
But is he still missing?
Yes, and there was.
So it's a different case.
Okay, there was some concern of maybe some mental illness that may or may not have been diagnosed. That they believe could be responsible for why he is missing. So those are two examples of just a few, but if and the same thing too, if you can't get your butt to CrimeCon to meet all the different podcasters and hand them a flyer. That's the best thing to do. Hand them a flyer because then there's that information that they can take with them home because that podcaster will meet dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people over the course of that weekend. And they're not going to remember the details of your loved one's case. But Bill is like I am. I bring a folder and a little briefcase with me. And if you hand me a flyer or tell me about somebody's case, it goes into my folder and it goes home with me, and I review it once I get home, and I make every attempt we can to help as many people as possible.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the best recommendation you could give to somebody who is interested in going about it that way. But you can also create a digital copy of that, and all of us podcasters have emails that you can reach us at, and feel free to reach out. And we understand it's an expense to go to CrimeCon. It's not something that everybody can do. That does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that your story cannot be told. You can still reach me anytime. You can still reach Nick at his email. I mean, it is something that we're open to. That is how you do it. And again, just getting that information on a one sheet or, little, it's very important. Picture, name, description of the case, and I am more than happy to help you bring attention to it.
Yeah, and I mean, my Twitter handle is X handle is TCG and also on Instagram, and the email is nic@truecrimegarage.com. I don't just encourage you to reach out with your loved one's story. I can't recall the last time True Crime Garage covered a case that wasn't a case that was recommended to us or suggested to us by a listener. So that is a very important part of what we try to do here. And we want to deliver what the listeners want to hear, obviously. And so especially if it's an unsolved case or a cold case or as difficult as it may be, even some of the more recent cases, we covered the Rachel Marin case when it was very new, unfortunately. And finally there's a recent arrest in that case. So that one, those cases, as brutal as that homicide was and as disturbing as that case was and aggravating, I do enjoy covering that kind of case because there is a call to action in that kind of case, right? We had a pretty vague description of the perpetrator, but they had some information on the suspect. And that was something that we really wanted to be very vocal about in her case, because that suspect was not just committed the abduction and murder of Rachel Marin on the East Coast, but had prior committed an assault in California. That's a dangerous dude right there, right? That's a guy, that's a no fences kind of guy where he'll go wherever he needs to go to stay a step in front of being brought to justice, but also to have the ability to commit other crimes.
Yeah, I mean, I follow a lot of those cases that occur, and I try to do the press conferences. I do those pressers of the week when they're justified. Jesse and I talked about the John Ray press conference, if you want to call it that, from about a week and a half ago, where he basically said a bunch of scandalous things. And
I haven't heard that one yet.
It's not even worth giving. It was just an attention grab, but he basically had thrown the idea out there that Rex's daughter had something to do with the case or had knowledge of something because of some social media stuff that they had stumbled upon. And it was very salacious, and I don't really want to explain anymore because there's no way because she was 13 the last time.
Well,
he committed the murder.
Again, I don't know anything about that, but the press conference he did with the police chief, this would have been
James Burke.
Yeah, but no, the
new police chief, because Burke's in
right. Didn't the new police chief receive some criticism for doing the press conference with James Ray?
John Ray.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think at this point he's sort of kind of a pariah in the investigation because, Jesse had been talking to Shannon Gilbert's sister, and she's like, I had no idea he was doing this. Right. And, it's just sort of, in my opinion, somebody who's used to be in the spotlight or wants to be in the spotlight, and they had just released all this new evidence about Rex and what murders he had been associated with. And I think he just wanted to kind of steal some of that thunder or catch some of that lightning. And it came off really poorly. And he's a character. Don't get me wrong.
He's entertaining. That's what I was going to say. He can be entertaining, but it seems like he's
jumped the shark.
Yeah, he's gotten a bit far away from his original agenda, which was not a bad one, of trying to get Shannon Gilbert's murder included in on the one, having it be looked at and considered a homicide first and foremost, but then having it maybe possibly tied to these other cases. But the problem now with that, without getting too far into that, because I know you were down that road last week, and we don't want to just run it back for the listeners this week. No. You would think with how many with how much communication we now know that Rex had with several of the victims, it seems likely we would have found the same trail connecting him to Shannon. And that's not been revealed yet. And I don't think we're going to find that. I do think that that 911 call is genuine, in the sense that I do think she truly believed, whether that was the outcome or not, I think she truly believed in that moment that her life was in danger. And for me, I think in that regard, for her case, unfortunately, if she was killed, they're going to have to look at somebody that was at that air quotes party that night, right? Or somebody with very direct ties to, I never loved the Michael Pack story where, I'm driving around the neighborhood looking for her to get her to get her in the car to take her home because it's my job to keep her safe. He seemed to give up awfully quick, didn't he, Bill? He seemed to give up a little quick there.
They don't pay me well enough to do that, so might as well just say I looked for her and take off.
Well, when the sun comes up, Michael Pack gets out of town is what it seemed like to me. But,
again, that case is just tragic because there are so many interesting and weird characters with the doctor. And again, we're not going to run it back, but that case alone, I think, is an outlier. I don't think it's connected to Rex. I think that's just coincidence, possibly. But again, we've all seen things, it never turns out necessarily the way we think it's going to.
Well, and over the years, there's been so much discussion about, and this is kind of how these things work. With Rex, we sit here today and say, my goodness, it's so hard to believe. Not just hard for me to believe, but hard for me not to buy the idea that his wife had no clue of what he was up to. And, but we had those same thoughts with BTK. We had the same thoughts with Gary Ridgway. And we've said it time and time again. Oh, there's no way in the world that spouse didn't know. And in those two cases, it's been all these years later. In Ridgway's case, over 20, and BTK right around about the same time, right? A little, almost 20, well, not quite 20 years, but in those cases, we've never seen any proof or anything to suggest otherwise since then. So it's we may find ourselves in the same boat with the Rex story.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I social media friends with Carrie, and that is, she's BTK's daughter, and she doesn't hide from that. And she's a huge advocate for all sorts of, cases. And she was at CrimeCon, and she's out there. She puts herself out there, and she does some really great things. And wish her nothing but the best. And she was actually one of those people that was quick to say, hold on a second, this is garbage, and you need to just keep the children out of this and the family members. It's possible. She's like, trust me, it's possible. It is what it is. And with that being said, we'll wait and see what happens going forward. If there is any more indictments that come out from that extensive search, which I just didn't really talk to Jesse about, but it just took me by surprise that they missed some of this stuff in the first search. But I don't know, go back, and it's better to do it again, and instead of just not doing it at all. So yeah. I'm glad they were thorough this time around, and it was obviously helpful for the family members that were involved with this horrific crime. And with that being said, and this case attempting to be closed at some point or another, we have another case, and that is the one in Shenandoah. And that has a new suspect, an actual suspect, not a new suspect, but an actual suspect in the murders. And I had Catherine Miles, the author who wrote Trailed, and she covered this case, and it was from 1996, and it was the Laura Lally Winans and Julianne Williams case, and they were murdered at their campsite. So this is big news in the world of true crime because of the fact that this case had gone unsolved for so long, as well as the fact that it had occurred in a national park, and so that kind of kicked off that whole, oh, there's a lot of crime in the national parks, or at least brought attention to that case. What are your thoughts on the new information?
Well, and you're right, Bill. Her book Trailed is fantastic, and that I think came out 2022, and so we learned that this big break in the case that they got came about they started on it in 2021. So that would roughly be like 25 years. And I'm a big believer that these unfortunate anniversaries of these unsolved cases do hold meaning, and not just for the victims, not just for the perpetrators, but also for law enforcement and the investigators. It's a nice little nudge. It's a nice little reminder, an unfriendly, unwanted reminder that this horrible tragedy took place. Somebody's responsible for it, and we've not figured it out yet. So I like the little nudge, and it looks like they were poring over the evidence again with a new team of detectives, and found additional items that they wanted to test and start that process in 2021. And we know that can be a rather cumbersome process, but eventually finding these items that they wanted to test, and then confirming and then reconfirming that the DNA of the person that went from unknown to prime suspect, number one suspect, was this DNA evidence that they found at the scene. And then this guy, we learned that this Walter Leo Jackson Sr., unfortunately for Walter Jackson Jr., his name is always going to be tied to his evil father, Walter Leo Jackson Sr. So that's always you hate to see that when they're putting out this information that they are including the word senior on there. But with Leo Jackson, from my understanding, he went by Leo Jackson. If you Google him, if you do a little search engine on Leo Jackson Sr. here, the first thing you're going to see is a newly fashioned seeking information FBI poster or flyer about this guy. And it's got a mugshot from when he was arrested for rape. He was a serial rapist. They don't, Bill, are you in my boat? They don't give a whole lot of information on the Shenandoah case other than to say he's been linked by DNA. It would appear, based off of the early reports that I'm seeing, that that's truly the only thing that they have linking him to it, other than he was known to visit, I believe is the word that they chose to use, visit the Shenandoah Park. That's a national park, correct?
Yeah, it is. And you know what? It's crazy, too. If you Google him and you image search him, he is kind of what you would think of as somebody who would be a serial rapist and murderer. He looks like somebody you would not want to run into at a truck stop.
And the flyer I'm looking at, provided by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they've chose to include a couple of different vehicles on there. One is a 1996. I would have to look up what kind of vehicle, make and model that is. But then there's also one of those larger
Well, he had the 84. He had he had the chestnut brown AMC Eagle.
Yes.
And that was in 1984.
Which is a wagon type vehicle.
Yeah, and then he drove the classic child molester serial killer van, the Ford Econoline 250.
Yeah.
Seems to be the model of choice for committing all sorts of horrible, awful crimes. So something for you there, Ford. It's like the white Bronco.
Well, and a serial rapist who it seems like committed most of those crimes in the Cleveland, Ohio area.
Ironically, he is from, well, he's not, I don't think he's from Cleveland, but yes, you are correct. He was a serial rapist in Cleveland, Ohio, and he had actually spent some time in the Cuyahoga County Corrections Facility. And according to the FBI press release, they are currently working with full coordination with their partners at the Cleveland Police Department and the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. So now this also says that Jackson, a residential painter by trade, was an avid hiker and was known to visit Shenandoah National Park. Now, at the time of Lally and Julie's murders, we believe, according to the FBI, he was driving a 1984 chestnut brown AMC Eagle.
Well, and he would, and that's what the crime scene was telling us about the Shenandoah case, because that it looked like somebody had hiked up to their camp and then started the attack. So my guess would be he may have spotted them at some point and kept an eye on them for a brief period of time to make sure that this was a female couple. They had been together for about a year, and it was a pretty serious relationship from my understanding. The two, I think, and I mean this in a cute way. They look almost like sisters to me. Like they have some resemblance to one another, I believe. But they were both young women, whole lives in front of them, 24, 26 years old. And they loved being outside. In fact, that's how they met, was for their love of the outdoors. And it's such a shame, it's beyond a shame, but we talk about the Shenandoah case. We talk about the Delphi case, and these predator types are going to these locations looking for victims. This is not a situation where he ended up in some kind of unforeseen altercation with one of these ladies. This isn't a situation where they got into an argument and in a fit of rage, he attacked them. No, this was a simply put, evil, sexually motivated double homicide. And they were found bound. Their throats were slit, and the crime scene itself being outdoors. We've talked about that before. You and I have many times about how complicated that can be. And I believe it sat undiscovered for, I think, 2 days. That would sound about right to me, because
it was in a secluded area. That's the biggest thing that really kind of drove Catherine. It was like, it was off the beaten path.
Right.
And so to speculate, since this individual unfortunately passed away in 2018, so he won't face justice for this crime, but at least he won't be committing any more crimes. The idea that he was an avid hiker and he was frequenting Shenandoah, my guess is he just stalked these girls until they were vulnerable and then pounced and then got away on foot and continued on with his hike. I think that would be the most logical Occam's razor-esque explanation.
Mm-hmm. And like very likely with his Cleveland cases as well. Stumbled upon or spotted an opportunity
And it makes you wonder, and it makes me wonder because I'm from Cleveland originally, and I just wonder what other cases he possibly could be connected to in that area, because as we know, there are tons of unsolved rapes in all sorts of major cities, but Cleveland has a backlog like most cities do, and on rape kits, that is. And so who knows what this guy is actually involved with. I mean, if he was crazy enough, and I say that as like he bound them, he basically tortured them, he killed them. If he had the ability to do that, then clearly it couldn't have just, I mean, it could have been a one-off murder thing, but I would start looking at murders if I was the Cleveland police or the FBI that are unsolved in the Cleveland area.
It could be a one-off. You're exactly right. But when we talk about somebody having the history of violence that he does, with being a serial rapist, a convicted serial rapist, and now we're adding to that mix that this is a sexually motivated double homicide, he seems like one of these ones where it would be very easy. It's very easy for me to make that leap anyway, to go, okay, well, where's homicide victim number 3 for this guy?
Or 1.
Yeah, and and we're dancing around it, and we don't need to go into too much detail, but that crime scene, the way that I've multiple sources, the trailed book is fantastic, but multiple sources given a description of that crime scene, this is as bad as it gets, right? This is if he was capable of that, look, I don't want to go down this whole adventure of being nasty to the media. I'm very unhappy with the media these days, and you know what? And in a way, that makes me very proud to be a podcaster. This makes me very proud to have podcasters unite like we're doing here today, Bill, because I just feel like the information that comes out is so twisted. It's so sometimes
editorialized.
Thank you. That's a nice professional way.
There's a reason why I don't work in mainstream media anymore, and that is because you can't tell a story in 2 minutes.
And I get it. This guy's never been convicted in a court of law, and I'm respectful of that. However, several of the online articles that I've read, they're just simply saying he is the suspect. He is the number one suspect. Well, if your math is right, if your science is right, that his DNA ties him to the scene and makes him that number one suspect, it's like a 1 in, I think it was 2.3 trillion that the DNA is his and no one else's. And no one else's. Guess what? We don't have that number of people on this planet, so it has to be his, right? Like, look, I'm not going to pretend to be Albert Einstein here with the math, but I know well and good that when you have less than 9 billion people on the planet, and you're telling me that it's a 1 in 2.2 trillion, that it's this guy,
2.6 trillion,
2.6. Guess what? You nailed it. He's the guy. Just go ahead and just say he murdered them.
The FBI says, and they rarely do this.
The FBI said it, but a couple of these news outlets are just saying they're calling him a suspect. Well,
I think that is because they can't prosecute him.
Well, and then that becomes the problem with what this.
I don't know, though. I'm not a lawyer, so please don't take that as any sort of like I know something that
Bill is secretly a lawyer.
I am secretly practicing law.
He's practicing.
I'm practicing avian law. Anybody who's a fan of It's Always Sunny will get that reference.
Well, that's weird because I practice maritime law.
Oh, there you go. Maritime law. Arrested Development.
Arrested Development. So here we go. But
let's combine all this great
This
sitcoms.
case always had some very loose ties to the Colonial Parkway cases. And there was some suspicion that these could possibly be connected. I think there was even a suspect that was somewhat of a shared suspect in one of the Parkway cases and the Shenandoah case. But the thing was, the one part that people had wondered about too, and I know this from discussions with Bill Thomas and discussions that I've listened to on your show with Bill Thomas, that he had conversations with law enforcement where some had wondered, could the perpetrator of the Colonial Parkway murders, when he saw another lesbian couple, you remember the first case in that series is thought to be Bill's sister, Kathy Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lesbian couple. And that maybe he was attempting to relive his first kill. And now we know today that, we know who's responsible for the Shenandoah case. We unfortunately don't know who's responsible for Bill Thomas's sister's death and murder. And that one,
they're getting closer. I think I do believe that they are getting closer. I think it just takes
I feel bad because with that one, I remember talking with Bill on your show, and I told him I not trying to give him false hope or anything, but after really reviewing the Colonial Parkway case, I told him that I thought that of the four, that would be the most likely one to solve first, because the description of the crime scene and the descriptions of what was done to the victims was telling to me that there should be more evidence, physical evidence at that crime scene than at the other three.
Yeah. For Bill, I definitely feel bad, and I definitely feel bad for all the families that are involved with the Colonial Parkway cases. And I think that speaking with Bill at CrimeCon recently, he still is very positive, still angry at the FBI for his reasons that are justified, and it is something that I think he is going to just continue on pursuing until he gets an answer.
Well, there's a million reasons to like Bill Thomas. Anybody that's ever met him or spoke with him, if you don't enjoy him, I would wager that the problem is you. But there's a lot of fight in that dog, right?
Yes, there is.
And so he will continue the battle. I have every confidence in that, and I'm happy to help him, and I know you're more than happy to help him as well. But the concern here, so for those that may not know, the Colonial Parkway murders, 2 of the 8, we can't confirm that all 8 of those homicides
are
in fact connected. But what we have is 4 different, what all appear to be either a murder or abduction. 4 different scenes where a murder or a double homicide or a double abduction takes place. 2 of the victims have never been found, and they can call it a missing persons case if they want. There's every indicator to me that unfortunately, those 2 individuals have been killed. And so Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., here's another senior moment. Is that what we're going to call that now, a senior moment? But Alan Wade Wilmer Sr.
Let's hope not. Let that
has been connected to... he is the perpetrator of 2 of those 8 homicides.
Yes.
And
you guys have done a lot of coverage on it. I've noticed that you've posted a lot of stuff on your Twitter, X handle, whatever, about this particular guy and his vehicle.
And he killed a woman that was not connected to the Parkway cases at all, in a whole complete separate incident. So this guy traveled, let's say a region would be appropriate to say, right? He traveled a region by occupation. He was a waterman, a fisherman, a hunter, and he may have owned a painting business at one time. No, a tree. He owned a tree trimming, tree cutting, tree service business at one time as well. And so his name has been kind of tossed around now as being a possibility with a few different victims. And I like this guy. I think he's good for a lot of several murders. Now, the problem that Bill has, and I hate to attempt to speak for somebody because I can never speak as eloquently as Bill or as intelligently as Bill. But Bill Thomas and I have an issue with Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., and it touches back on something we were just discussing with this serial rapist from Cleveland going out to Shenandoah and killing two very perfectly nice ladies. What else did he do? Well, in the Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. situation, that dude had never been convicted of a serious offense. So what would seem to be the very basic, easy thing to do is go, well, now we have his DNA. Let's throw it in a CODIS and see what happens. Do we get any hits, right? Do we get any hits into this DNA database of unsolved rapes and murders? They're saying because of a legality that they can't do that because he was never convicted of these 3 homicides that we now know that he's responsible for. And Bill's speculation and some other people's speculation is that, well, we toss this guy's DNA into CODIS and this thing's going to light up like a Christmas tree. He's going to be connected to a whole bunch of them. Same problem with Boardman. I don't know if you followed the Boardman murders, but so the Boardman case, there were three different boys that were murdered in Boardman, Ohio, back in the early 70s. Okay, so one of the cases has never been solved. Brad Bellino was murdered in 1972 in Boardman, Ohio. They believe that he was walking home late at night from a friend's house. He's like 12, but he's a young-looking 12. Like, if I showed you a picture of Brad, you'd probably go, is he 9? You would guess that he was younger. He's walking home, and he was known to hitchhike. And
it's the 70s. That's not that uncommon.
Well, yeah, and so the thought always was that maybe he got into a vehicle with the wrong person. He's found murdered. Somebody threw his body in a small dumpster behind a business in town. Like drove back into town to place the body in that dumpster, and the
That's weird.
Refuse collectors spotted a foot sticking up out of the trash when they went to either lift up the lid or close the lid, one of the two. His case sat unsolved for 50 years, 50 years. Boardman PD never gave up on that case, Bill. Never gave up on it. They kept submitting the physical evidence that they had for further testing. They had a list of suspects a mile long. They were going to other states to interview people that they considered to be suspects. In fact, they spoke to one individual. He became a suspect simply because he lived in Boardman at the same time that Brad Bellino was killed and lived in Hollywood, Florida at the same time that Adam Walsh was killed. And just by having that one thing, they go, well, this guy, we got to talk to this guy. How does one guy live in 2 places where 2 boys similar in age are abducted and killed? And so they end up solving this thing 50 years later. Joseph Hill, who I've spoke to people that live in Boardman, who have spoke to people that grew up on the street, in the neighborhood street where Joseph Hill lived with his wife and child. And these people say, yeah, we would go over to the Hill house. The guy was super nice. If you told me that there was a killer that lived on our street, he would be the last person on the street that I would pick. And that's 1972. Brad Bellino's raped and murdered, strangled with a belt, dumped into a dumpster. 1974, David Evans walking home, Boardman, Ohio, disappears. It's a snowy night. It's cold out. Disappears. They find his hat, his winter hat, like six or seven doorsteps from his front door. There's a bunch of footprints in the snow. Now, the speculation here, too, was, well, he got into the vehicle. I said no. And I know, I guarantee you, Bill, that police said no. He didn't just get into a vehicle. Somebody didn't coax him into a vehicle. There was a scuffle. Somebody grabbed him. That's why you have all those footprints in the snow. That's why his hat is still sitting there in the snow. He's found placed behind some bushes near this business, again, another business, and frozen because he had been out there, but he died of complications of diabetes. Like, he slipped into a diabetic coma, didn't recover. Medical examiner rules it natural causes because of the diabetes. Thank God for Boardman PD. I mean, you want to hats off to an organization, an agency. They said no. Sorry, we are going to continue to investigate this as a homicide, even though the doctor guy over here, Sergeant Egghead, is telling us that this is a natural causes. We're going to investigate this as a homicide because we found marks on the body indicative that he was dragged, placed behind these bushes, thrown behind these bushes, and oh, by the way, his wrist was broken as well, and his wrist broke post-mortem. The police chief, common sense says, David Evans didn't slip into a diabetic coma, pass away, and then place his body behind the bushes and break his wrist in the process after death. So they treat it as a homicide, continue to treat it as a homicide. Well, then it's like 6 months or so after they solved the Brad Bellino case, they go, wait a second, the same DNA evidence that closed out the Brad Bellino case is now closing out the David Evans case. Joseph Norman Hill of Boardman, Ohio, killed both of these two boys. Abducted, raped, and murdered 2 children. And it's the same problem. The Boardman PD, they say, we have very limited information on this dude, Joseph Norman Hill. We know that he was married. We know that he had a kid. We know that he lived on this street. And then these kids are killed in the 70s. And he moved away, I want to say 78, 79, somewhere in that neighborhood, to San Bernardino County, California. Same problem with Joseph Norman Hill. We know what kind of monster, well, we have an idea of what kind of monster this dude was. We have an idea of what kind of monster Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was. And because neither of them got charged with these homicides, neither of them got convicted of these homicides during their lifetime, we can't put them into the database. What murdered boys' parents or siblings in California or between here and San Bernardino County wouldn't be or get and receive some form of healing from knowing who was responsible for what happened to their child? And I know that these aren't this isn't any one person's fault that we can't do this. This isn't any one organization's fault that we are saying that we are limiting ourselves to saying that we can't do this. But I don't know. I take issue with it, and I think it's easy for others to understand why somebody should take issue with it.
I don't see I have an issue with the whole, just because they're passed doesn't mean that they're like hands off. I think it should be something that families want to know that these things are going to get resolved and not be stonewalled by some stupid red tape.
Yeah, and even from a red tape standpoint, what resources are being expensed from different agencies that have a cold case on their books, or that, you know, what false leads are they attempting to track down? We're talking about money, resources, people, power, and what have you. What is being used up that you could focus your efforts on other cases, if you knew, this one that's stuck around like a black cloud above this town for 30, 40, 50 years, we could close it out real quick right here by connecting it to one of these guys.
Who did we go to change that law?
I don't know. The creator, probably the creator. We talked about that.
Hey, we need to go next time we're on Creator Row in Denver. Let's look for that person.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a direct line of communication with the creator.
No, I don't think a lot of people do.
But yeah, and then so those are cases that both share some commonalities, right? The reason to be optimistic about some of these cold cases, plenty of reason to be optimistic, but also it's aggravating to see that a person in both of these cases, I really hesitate to call them a person, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., and they need to know more about his life. They need to know more about his life. They just don't know. And same with Joseph Norman Hill. They need to know more about him and what rights of theirs are we protecting at this point, right? I mean, by not doing this, and so
maybe the family rights, but again, if they committed these crimes and the evidence is pointing towards it, really, is that something that the family should be stonewalling or holding up? I mean, the family of the perpetrator, I don't think that's justified.
Which it's not to say that there's not other means of connecting crimes to these two individuals.
No,
but this would be a way that, like Bill said, would cut a lot of red tape and would seem to make a whole lot of sense. But look, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of dude I am. When I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong. And Bill, I have to come on your show today and make sure that I say that I might have been wrong. I think I'm wrong on something here. So recently, Northeast Ohio, you and I have talked about the Metro Parks murders. There was a double homicide
in the Rocky River Metro Parks.
Yep, in the Rocky River Metro Parks. And I was very vocal about not believing that the Metro Parks were capable of solving certain crimes, one being homicide, but yet it seems like they have.
Right.
In a somewhat, I hesitate to say similar case, but that certainly shares some similarities with.
It rings a few of the bells, that's for sure.
Yeah, so they make an arrest of a Victor Vendler.
Yep. 22-year-old.
22-year-old young man who they're charging him with killing 74-year-old Leroy Johnston at the Mill Stream Run Reservation in Strongsville. Now, so this, you're getting a lot of... It says after further investigation by the Cleveland Metro Parks Police Department, it was determined that Victor Vendler was linked to the crime. He was arrested on May 28th of this year, 2024. So I have to issue a sincere apology to the Metro Parks Police Department. They clearly are very capable of solving a homicide. Now, I would like for them to solve the other two, Darnell Sledge case. That's another one of those cases where I just worry that there's not.
It's Carnell, just but yeah, apologies. But the fact that
Catherine Brown and Carnell Sledge.
Yeah, and so with those two, and this is why we're bringing this up, is that it was June 4th in 2019, which was basically 5 years ago, and the 5-year anniversary is right about now, and they were killed while sitting on a bench alongside the river at a very busy time we know of, and nobody saw a vehicle, nobody saw anything, nobody saw an individual. We have no suspect description. The second that I saw this case come across the wire, the news wire of X or Twitter, I had to instantly think of those cases, or that case, because of the fact that he may have been 17 at the time of that murder, but as we know, 17-year-olds are more than capable of committing murder, especially cold-blooded murder. And I wouldn't be surprised if, he somehow crossed paths with Sledge in his line of work, because he had worked with troubled kids in his past, and you never know who is doing what. And again, if he was 17, he could have escaped on foot, ran up the hill. The area is surrounded by steep cliffs on one side and then a climbable hill on the other. I'm just saying, if I was the FBI and I was the Metro Parks Police, I would be paying attention to this case and start looking and seeing what this individual was up to on that day of June 19th, 2019.
Yeah, and the problem with the Catherine Brown and Carnell Sledge case is you could look at that. It's easy for us to sit here and look at it and go, this could be a totally random person that just walked up. From my understanding, Carnell's sitting on the park bench facing the river, and she would have either been sitting next to him or standing in front of him. But it looks to me like, if I have to try to play this thing out, where the killer walks up behind him, shoots him, now she's aware that there's an attack going on and attempts to flee with nowhere to run, right? You don't want to run toward the shooter. And now your only other option is to run toward the river. And she may have attempted to do that and then got gunned down in the process. So you could look at it and go and say that it is maybe random. Now, in Victor's case, the one that he's being charged with, the information is very, very limited that's out there. It's so limited that it's like you get like 2 paragraphs from every source, and then here's the list of charges. It's 4 charges from my understanding. And
$1 million bond too. That's not like, that's being taken seriously.
Well, and they're saying that that the two were acquaintances, that they knew each other somehow. The victim and perpetrator knew each other somehow. The media is not telling us, or the police anyway, are not telling us how the two would have known each other. That's a big discrepancy in age between 21-year-old. He would have been roughly 21 at the time of the murder, and the victim's 74 years old. But I really believe, Bill, and it is interesting, and there's plenty of reason to discuss and say that, is there any chance that these cases are connected, that it's the same perpetrator? I really think that with the Sledge Brown case that we are talking about similar. I think it was somebody that knew them. You did point out here's a way that this guy could have known them. We should also point out, for people that aren't familiar with either of these cases, one thing that amongst the other disturbing details of the case of the elderly man is that when Victor's arrested, his mugshot, he's smiling, grinning ear to ear, like he's like happy. Like there's no indication to me that.
Nope. He looks like he's proud of what he has accomplished.
He doesn't appear to be remorseful. He doesn't even appear to be like scared or sad that he got arrested.
Nope. Boastful or boasting. He looks very, very accomplished. Like he set out on his goal and he accomplished it, and he is smiling. But yeah, that part that stood out to me as somebody who could have been always that way, and that's why I think there needs to be some more investigation. And just thinking about what you had talked about with the Metro Parks Police, the current chief of the Metro Parks Police is one Kelly Stillman, and Stillman used to be a police officer in Rocky River, and he was, I think he was eventually police chief, but he was around back in the days when I was running the mean streets of Rocky River. And
when you were smoking dope in the car wash, Bill?
Yeah, I might have had a run-in or two with Mr. Stillman here, but
was he a fair man?
He was kind of a dick, but
Well, he just solved a murder, so we'll be nice.
We'll give him that. We'll let him go. But that was his job, and again, I'm sure I wasn't a pleasure to be dealing with either. But yeah, it's just funny how these connections work, and just do some more investigating on this individual.
Well, and that's exactly right. And so the thing here is we have, this is from the prosecutors, Cuyahoga County prosecutors website, is the charges. Okay, so Victor Vendler was indicted on the following charges: 2 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of kidnapping, 1 count of tampering with evidence, 1 count of gross abuse of a corpse. From my understanding, the wording that they're choosing to use is that the perpetrator, Victor, he lured 74-year-old Leroy Johnston into this park area and then shot him there. Now, the body's discovered in September 30th of 2023.
Yeah.
The murder took place on the 24th. So the body's there for a period of time. And from my understanding, I'm wondering where this abduction takes place, right? Because there's a kidnapping.
Yeah.
They say that these two knew one another, but did he really lure him into the park, or was our victim already in the park, and now the perpetrator at gunpoint walks him described as deep into the woods?
And as we know with the O.J. Simpson kidnapping case, you don't really have to be holding somebody. As long as you have a gun, they will consider that kidnapping.
Well, exactly. As soon as you've put a person in a place, or you're holding them in a place that they do not want to be or do not have to be, it's technically kidnapping. But with the way that this scene is described, is that the victim's found deep in the woods, far off of an established trail.
Yeah.
And so then I go, well, is our victim already walking the trails? Is our victim just sitting in the park, and he's moved at gunpoint and then killed? Because I don't for a second think that this 22-year-old killed our victim and then moved him a great deal of distance.
No.
And gross abuse of a corpse is also a very generic charge as well. It could be as simple as he threw a bunch of leaves and sticks over top of him. But you tampering with evidence, that could be just as simple as concealing the murder weapon. But now you have ballistics that you can check, and the other thing that we're not being told too is what in their investigation led them, a 74-year-old victim, to a 22-year-old perpetrator. What led them to this individual?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is. It was clearly a long investigation, 6 months, 9 months about, I'd say. That's pretty extensive. And to actually have a suspect in custody after these other 2 people were murdered and there's no information, I don't know. I think maybe we are in a situation where the perpetrator could have a connection, could be completely random. Again, just speculating on that one, more so just because we want attention drawn to the other case, since the other case is unsolved. In this case, looks like it's going to be solved. So I feel like with Sledge and Catherine Brown, I feel like that's my goal, and hopefully, I know that's your goal, and covering this case as well, is that eventually the FBI is able to narrow in on a suspect.
Yeah, I really feel like in the Brown Sledge case, I really feel like just my gut tells me that the perpetrator, and I know this isn't anything that's groundbreaking here because this is often the case. I really feel like the perpetrator, the murderer in that case, knew either Sledge or knew Brown and followed one of them there. May not have known both of them, but I think they knew one of them, and it may have had even a close personal relationship, or at least they believed it to be a close personal relationship and followed one of them there. That's why I'm so shocked that case hasn't, that we've not gotten an arrest in that case, because I feel like there's resources that were available at the time that you could have got traffic information or cell phone information that would have led you to know who was going to. They weren't there very long, Bill, right?
They had been there not even 5 minutes.
Right. Not even 5 minutes from the time they entered to the time that they are murdered. And I have personally talked to over 12 people that lived in that area at that time that told me that they had frequented that park on many occasions.
By there all the time.
You were one of these people.
Yeah.
And every single one of them told me the exact same thing. There is no way in hell that nobody heard that gunshot. Especially at the time of day that took place.
It just leads me to believe that the perpetrator is somebody who escaped on foot. Is what I believe, in my honest opinion. And that's, again, I'm just a podcaster with a journalism background. So I'm just saying, that's my 2 cents. I just feel like if there's two murders, granted, Millstream is a little bit separate from the Rocky River Metro Parks, but they're still within just a few miles. We're not talking leaps and bounds here. We may be making some leaps here, but again, as far as distances go, we're talking about 5 miles. So, not that big of a difference. And if this individual perhaps did know Carnell and did follow them, well, then that would fall in line with what you had been suggesting. And it's what I think as well, because again, nobody pulls into a parking lot, sits down, and then within 5 minutes is shot and killed just randomly, unless somebody's standing in the woods waiting just to kill whomever. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And I mean, with Victor, we could end up finding out that he was a neighbor of this poor man, or
which is most, in my opinion, that's probably the most likely scenario. It was some neighbor acquaintance or family acquaintance, and that he. I mean, there's not a robbery charge on there, right?
Right.
So,
look,
so what's the goal? What's the goal here?
The place to rob an old person is in their house, not out in a park.
Yeah, exactly.
But what else was going on there? Something led them to this individual, and it was he attempting to? Was this a situation where somebody wanted to cash somebody's SSI check, or it's hard to say. We'll get some more information. It should be I'm saying to buckle up, because I think it's going to be a bumpy ride. And what tells me it's going to be a bumpy ride with this cat is that he's smiling and so happy in his mugshot there. I do believe
he probably thought he got away with it at this point, and you would think that he would have a different look on his face because of the fact that he probably thought he got away with it.
Yeah, your victim's not discovered for 5 or 6 days. And you are, unless you've already been under the microscope and you're aware of that, then like you said earlier, this is 7-8 months later. So you have some distance as far as time goes in this case. working on your side if you are the perpetrator. I don't know that this is him for certain, but I believe it to be him. I was looking at the perpetrator a little bit and seeing if I could figure out anything about their background or their personal history, and it appears that Victor Vendler was a package handler for FedEx. So I don't know if that means he was out on the road, knocking on doors, delivering packages, or if this was a person that worked at inside of one of the facilities. But
yeah, there's just, I mean, that is near the airport, so there could be a sorting facility out there. I know UPS has a sorting facility at the Hopkins Airport, but I'm not sure. I'm assuming FedEx does as well.
Yeah, and this arrest is pretty recent, so as this thing inches its way toward trial, we'll probably get more information on what the connection was between the two of them. Speaking of trial, you know, we talked about Rex Heuermann earlier, and I don't think that trial's happening this year.
No,
and
not with all the new cases that are continuing to come out.
And more, you know, just go ahead and try him for one of them already, right? Like, but that's neither here nor there. We're not here to just critique the system in at every facet. But that Delphi case, I don't think that one's getting to trial this year either. I know that they're attempting to be optimistic by saying that October.
Yeah.
But you know, we've seen time and time again, we've seen trial date come and go in the Delphi case, and I just feel so badly for the parents and the families of the two victims. They're one thing that gets lost in the sauce here is those poor families are still under a gag order. That they are observing, but the defense team doesn't seem to be willing to observe the gag order. So that's a whole other mess there. But these poor people have been experienced the worst tragedy that anybody could, and then had their names dragged through the mud for months and years afterwards. And then when we do know the face of evil in that case, we're told, oh, here's a gag order now too. Now you can't talk about it. So
yeah, I mean, we talked to
that's when I talk about direct line communication with the creator. That's one that I really pray gets to see a courtroom sooner than later. The one thing that is fascinating to me is I'm not a big trial guy, and I say that on True Crime Garage. I'm far more intrigued by the manhunt or finding the guy. What evidence led us to who's responsible? What evidence can we use to figure out who did this? I'm way more into the investigation part of true crime than I am the trials. But you know, every state operates very differently, and one thing that I don't love about the state of Indiana when it comes to trials of crimes of this level, they don't do a real good job with their death penalty. I'm not here to be pro death penalty or go against the death penalty, but if you have it, you should probably use it or just get rid of it. But they're not really good with using it as far as this is your consequence, or this may be your consequence if you're found guilty. You got to swing that hammer once in a while, because it may just help you get your conviction by way of confession or working a deal with some guy that you'd rather not deal with. But one thing that I find very intriguing, been doing a little. This case pops in my head from time to time, and I'm sure, Bill, you're this way, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are this way too. A case that fascinates you, and then you kind of you move on from it, you get away from it for a while, but it just always kind of nagging at you, and it gets to you every now and then. The David Cam case, suspected of killing his wife and two kids in the garage of their home in southern Indiana, and he's now out I believe he's still out. He's been tried like 3 times, so it gets confusing.
I think they've even tried a 4th. I mean, it's crazy how many times they've put him up on trial.
Well, there's another man that is locked up for his involvement in that murder, and I frankly believe that and I can't think of the guy's name right now, but frankly, I believe he's solely responsible. But anyway, I was doing some further reading on the David Cam case, and one thing I discovered in Indiana, one thing that they do differently in their court systems that they don't do in Ohio, and I'm sure that, again, this varies state by state. The jury can ask questions of people on the stand in Indiana.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I almost think we should figure out a way to kind of work. I think that should be more of something that is
national.
Well, how can it be hurtful, right? I mean, would be a way of vetting the questions in advance.
Sure.
But in particular, one of the jury members was saying that they had one, can you imagine you're sitting on a jury and some of these trials go weeks and weeks, 6 weeks, and a man's life hangs in the balance. He's accused of killing, damn near wiping out a family. The stakes couldn't be any higher. You are selected as a member of that jury. You sit there in that chair quietly for 6 weeks, and now you're told, hey, you got to go make a decision. This guy's he's in prison the rest of his life, or we're gonna execute him eventually. You, Bill Huffman, have to make the decision. And you're sitting there going, I had like 3 questions. They never bothered to ask these 3 questions. If I could get a straight answer on these 3 questions, I could give you, you know what I mean? So I feel like you're being judged by a jury of your peers. And in a lot of situations, they're not allowed to have any real input or other than being a spectator, truly, of the court and the trial proceedings. So I thought that was brilliant. And there was one juror in the David Cam case. So she was a juror for the other guy that was charged and later convicted. And she chose the question because his defense was not that he didn't do it. His defense was David Cam murdered them. I was there when he did it. I provided the murder weapon to him. So a very I'm guilty of some things, but not guilty of triple homicide. And she said, very simple. I wanted to know. She said she asked him, what was David Cam wearing that night? And he couldn't describe what David Cam was wearing that night. And but you were with him the whole time that he was in the garage wiping out his family, and you sold him the gun. You were there that same night, and you can't describe for us what he was wearing. And when he attempted to, he got it completely wrong. So, I mean, I found that to be rather intriguing. And I hope that, that trial's older, in the past, but I hope that is still something that remains today, because you want to talk about a case where they're trying to muddy the waters with all kinds of questions. The Delphi case is that these spinsters that are working the defense, they're attempting everything. They're putting all kinds of lipstick and makeup on this thing, and they're trying to dress it up to be something that it truly is not. And I just hope and pray that those jurors, the members of that jury, don't get confused and can see it for exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think that can be said about a lot of cases, and a lot of cases where you have hung juries and suspected people get off, and that's just, it's awful. And there's 2 sides of each story, but I think in certain circumstances, I think sometimes it's pretty easy to determine what happened, but proving it in the court of law is definitely something that's it takes more than just a few pieces of evidence, as we've learned. It may look like a really good case, but you never know until it gets into the jury's hands.
That's right. Well, it stopped
and I know
raining
you've got
here,
a roll.
Bill. Yeah, it stopped raining here, Bill, so I'm going to go back outside. But it was a lot of fun talking with you. And
always a pleasure. Where to find your stuff?
Updating some of these cases that we've talked about over the years. Well, True Crime Garage is the big podcast that I'm a part of. I do a fun, leisurely podcast called The Big Kids Show. And that one, we've been doing that for 2 years now. So check, if you want something that's not true crime for a little fun at the gym or a little fun on your commute, check out The Big Kids Show. And then again, True Crime Garage. And we also have a show that's available on Apple subscription and Patreon for True Crime Garage listeners called Off the Record. So check all of those out. And Bill will, I shouldn't say that I know it. Hopefully, maybe we'll see each other in the flesh before then, but absolutely we will see each other at Denver CrimeCon 2025.
Absolutely. And it's always a joy to have you on, and to cover such a myriad amount of cases was very enjoyable. And again, always great to see you at CrimeCon. Congratulations on all of your success. I will reference the fact that you did also you moderated the John Douglas discussion, and that is a huge accomplishment as well in front of hundreds of people. So kudos to you on that, and you met the man himself.
Yeah, it was. I've been very lucky. John Douglas has been on True Crime Garage 3 different times, and so when it was announced that he would be doing an event at CrimeCon, I reached out to CrimeCon and said, hey, I interviewed him 3 times for True Crime Garage. I think he likes me. So if you need anybody to MC the event, I would be more than happy to do so. So that was a big moment for me. And it was very strange, man. Like, because I'm sitting backstage and I'm sitting there just thinking to myself, I'm like, 9 years ago, like 8-9 years ago, I started doing this thing. And had you told me 8 years ago that I would be standing backstage with FBI legend mine hunter John Douglas, who I'm just chit chatting with, because we've already spoke 3 different times prior, I would have said, you are a crazy man.
Right.
William Huffman, you are a crazy person. But no, that happened, and that only happened because of CrimeCon, and so I was very appreciative. And if anybody wants to listen to a great audio book or pick up a great true crime book, I also wrote one of those called The Delphi Murders: The Quest to Find the Man on the Bridge. That's available on Amazon and available on Audible as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it's crazy. August, I'll be starting my 7th year in this industry, and it's pretty wild. So things have fallen into place, and you have obviously seen a lot of success. So I love it when you come on. I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable, and again, the listeners love it. So thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Who Killed. I again am back from CrimeCon. I am rising out of my doldrums, and I am coming into the summer with some fresh energy, and I'm looking forward to covering some new cases and talking with some victim advocates as well as some family members that I've met at CrimeCon. So many thanks to Nick of True Crime Garage for joining me this week. He is always a pleasure to have on, and he's always very knowledgeable. And again, congratulations to them for being in the top 5 of the People's Choice Awards at the Clue Awards at the CrimeCon. So pretty awesome stuff, well-deserved. And again, now that I'm back on schedule, I'll be dropping new episodes every Friday and probably doing some pressers of the week as well. And In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at BillHuffman3, or, as always, until next time, stay healthy and be safe.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.
Hi, this is Amy and Vanessa from She Goes by Jane, where we shine light on the stories of missing and unidentified women. On November 7th, we're sharing Nahida's story for the first time in a podcast. And this is a story that I thought I knew, but after reading police reports, became more complicated than I thought. When investigators are called to Nahida Khatib's house, everything looks fine. Her purse is on the kitchen table, her cup of coffee is on the counter, and her 2-year-old niece is in her playpen. The only thing amiss? Nahida is missing.
Every week we feature a poem written in honor of the person we're talking about. This week we're joined by one of our favorite actresses. You might know her from Sister Act or King of the Hill or The Descendants. But if you're like us, you'll know her from Hocus Pocus. She's the much beloved Kathy Najimy. Join us November 7th to hear Nahida's story.